If you're using a Windows computer and you have been thinking about getting started with Linux, learning the basics of Linux and what can be done with it, now is probably a better time than ever to do it. We have more options to install Linux, and these options are more convenient than ever before. So you can of course install Linux directly on the computer, and it can be done as the sole operating system on the computer, or you can use dual boot to have both Windows and Linux on the same computer. Another option is to use some third-party hypervisor, such as VirtualBox or VMware. These will allow you to run virtual machines, which can be of course Linux virtual machines. But in this video, I want to talk about an alternative which is built into the recent versions of Windows, and this is WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. Now, about the name itself, Windows Subsystem for Linux, in my opinion, it's a bit confusing. And if I had to choose the name, I would probably go with the opposite, Linux Subsystem for Windows. But no one asked me, and that's the name Microsoft decided to go with, so we have Windows Subsystem for Linux, or WSL for short. So let's see how we can get started with WSL and how we can get an Ubuntu virtual machine on top of it. Now, even the process of getting started with WSL really improved over the years, and today with Windows 11 it's really simple to get started with it. All we need to do is open PowerShell, and by the way, I'm not going to open PowerShell directly, but to access it via the Windows terminal. So let's look for the Windows terminal. But I'm not just going to run it from here, but I want to run it as an administrator. So I'll open it from here where it says Run as Administrator. And here we have the Windows terminal, and if we look over here at the name of the tab, we can see Administrator, which means that we now have PowerShell running as administrator. Now, just to make it clear, what we see here is nothing but PowerShell. We can even see it over here where it says PS, which is short for PowerShell. And the Windows terminal is not some kind of new terminal for Windows, it's the same PowerShell we've had for years with a new, more sleek design. So let's go ahead and install WSL and see how simple it is. All we need to run is one simple command, WSL --install. Once I hit enter, all of the prerequisites for WSL will be installed, and then WSL itself will be installed as well. As soon as this will be done, Ubuntu, which is the Linux distro that we're going to use, will be downloaded. Great, so the installation is taking place, and as we said, first the prerequisites will be installed, then WSL itself, and eventually Ubuntu will be downloaded. It's going to take a few minutes, so I'll stop the recording and I'll be back once it's done. Great, so this step of the installation is done. We now need to restart the computer for the installation to complete. So let's do that, let's restart the computer. And we can see that updates are underway. These are all kinds of features that are needed for WSL. They are not installed by default in Windows 11, as most people don't use them, but if we want to use WSL, Windows needs them, so it installs them for us. And you can see that as soon as the computer restarted, the installation of WSL itself is completed. Then look what we have here, Ubuntu. So now the installation of Ubuntu itself is taking place, and it won't take too long. And here it's done. And we now have an Ubuntu system running on top of Windows. But to start using it, we first need to configure a user. So let's enter a username for our new Ubuntu Linux. And we now need to provide a password. Now notice that when I type in the password, nothing will show up. And it's okay, that's how it works in Linux. When we write passwords, what we type in is read by the system, but nothing shows up. So let's enter some password. And we need to retype the password just to make sure we didn't have any typos. And that's it. We now have Ubuntu up and running, ready for use. And since this is a complete installation of Linux, specifically Ubuntu, everything that can be done with an Ubuntu system can be done here. So let's, as an example, see which version of Linux we have. And to do that, I'm going to use the command lsb release-a. And we can see that indeed we have Ubuntu, and specifically Ubuntu 20.04. We can of course update our Ubuntu system. So let's run sudo apt update. And we need to type in our Linux password, the one we just set up. and our Linux system is being updated. And let's see another example of Linux application that we can run, and I'll go with htop, which is somewhat equivalent to Windows Task Manager. So to run it, all we need to do is run htop. And here we can see the list of the running processes, we can see how much memory you have, and we can also see how occupied our processors are. To exit htop, I'll press Ctrl+C. By the way, we can also access our Ubuntu system from the Windows terminal. So let's close this window. And let's open the Windows terminal once again. And as we said before, this tab of the Windows terminal is running PowerShell, as can be seen here, Windows PowerShell. But now I'm going to open a second tab, which will run Ubuntu. So to do that, I'm going to click here on the small arrow. And as you can see, we now have a new option, one we didn't have before, and this is Ubuntu. So let's choose Ubuntu. And here we got access to our Ubuntu system right from the Windows terminal.